Hello everyone, TimeToGrind here, and today I wanted to talk about Epic Games announcing the Epic Games Store. And at first glance, this just seems like a big company making their own platform so they don't have to pay Valve the Valve tax. And the Valve tax is obviously, if you sell your game on Steam, you have to give normally around 30% of the funds that you make in all of your revenue. So whether it just be the sale of the game or DLC or in-app purchases, anything like that, 30% of it goes to Valve. And that's because they own the platform. And generally across most of the industry, whether it be app stores or, you know, anytime there's a platform, whoever owns the platform takes around 30%. And there's a lot of variety in that, but averaging, it's around 30%. So Valve was taking what was average. And on top of that, Valve kind of has an almost monopoly. I mean, there's practically no competition in PC gaming platforms. I mean, you have some companies like Battle.net and, you know, Blizzard Activision, where they have their own client and all of their exclusive games are on that, but nobody really competes with Valve for just having all of the games. So all these indie games and stuff like that. The biggest I can think of personally would be GOG, or, you know, GOG Galaxy or GOG Galaxy, however you pronounce it. And that's probably the biggest competition. But with Epic Games, they are announcing the Epic Games Store. And I do want to point out, Fortnite on PC and all of their other exclusive games already were in their own launcher. It's not like they're making this own launcher and they're taking their games off Steam. Fortnite was never on Steam, obviously. It was always in their own launcher. They're just doing this huge revamp thing and they're opening up the store to everybody. So you will be able to submit games just like any other developer. You can have your games published on there as well. Now, the reason this is important is because it actually is most likely going to be able to compete with Steam. And the biggest reason being why is the revenue split they are doing. So like I said, Valve takes around 30%, and recently they just came out with an announcement that depending on how much money you make on your game, they'll actually give you more of that money. So they recently made some changes that now if you make over $10 million on a game on Steam, the revenue share will adjust to 75% and 25%, so they'll only take 25%. And then if you make 50 million, then it goes to 80% and 20%. So there's actually a way to now get more percentages of it, especially for big companies, because I think what Valve is a little scared of is these big companies making their own clients, because we have seen a huge surgence of that where these companies are like, okay, well, we don't have to make a client good enough to have all of the games. Let's just make a client that has only our games, and we're a big enough company where people will go and download our client just to play our games, you know, whereas an indie game or something like that that's not known about, they have to be on Steam, because nobody's going to download it straight off the internet, or nobody's going to download a launcher for a random indie game, or at the very least next to nobody compared to how many would on Steam, and that makes sense. But with the Epic Games Store, it is an 88 and 12% revenue split, which means just off the bat for everybody, you don't have to make $50 million on your game to just get 20% only taken away. You just are only having 12% taken away regardless, and this is huge. And they actually are quoted saying, the CEO said, "As a developer ourselves, we have always wanted a platform with great economics that connects us directly with our players. Thanks to the success of Fortnite, we now have this and are ready to share it with other developers." And that's great. They constantly are citing Fortnite and how much money they're making on Fortnite for reasons why they can do things. So, you know, recently we've had amazing things like all of the assets for Paragon just got put on the Epic Games, you know, the Unity store for free, because if you don't know, one of the big things about Epic Games is they have the Unreal Engine. That's a very, very big thing. And one of the cool things about that is they're saying that normally, you know, if you make a game with the Unreal Engine and you sell it, say even if you sell it on Steam, Epic gets about 5% of it. They just take 5% of the revenue because you used their engine. And, you know, depending on what licenses you have and stuff like that, you do sometimes have to pay up front for just, you know, to have it. Sometimes you don't. It's a free software, but there are some special things you could do. But if you are selling a game with it, normally you got to pay 5% of all of the funds. But they are saying if you publish your game on the Epic Games Store, you don't have to pay that 5% fee at all. So if you have a game that you made using their Unreal Engine and you upload it to Steam, or, you know, it gets published on Steam and it's selling there, and you aren't making $50 million, obviously, so you're still just on the 30 70 cut, because you're not going to hit even the 10 million threshold. Most likely to get the 75% rather than the 70%, you're going to have 65% of your money, because 30% of it's going to Steam, 5% of it's going to Epic for using the Unreal Engine. And now if you just do the same thing but you put it on the Unreal Engine and then you put it on the Epic Games Store, you're getting to keep 88% of the money, because Epic is only taking 12% of the money, and they'll waive all of the fees if you're selling it on their platform. Now obviously that doesn't count for Steam, so say you put it on Steam and the Epic Games Store, they don't take it away from Steam because they're wanting you to sell it on their platform. But the good thing is they're not saying you can't upload it to Steam, you can't have it on Steam. It's just, if you have it on the Epic Games Store, then whatever it makes on the Epic Games Store, the licensing revenue stuff of taking 5% of it off isn't applied there. And that is great, not only for people that are just making games through, Unreal Engine, because they're getting 5% more of their money, but for anybody that's putting their game on the Epic Game clients, the store, is going to get to keep 88% of their money, which, even if you make $50 million on your game on Steam, at most you'll get to keep 80% of your money. And Epic Games, you're getting to keep 88% regardless. So you're a small indie game that only maybe sells 1,000 copies, well, there you go, you get to keep 88% of it, and that's amazing. And on top of all of that, and I mean, that's a huge reason, that's one of the biggest reasons why I believe Epic Games is going to actually have the biggest competition with Steam, because we've seen, GOG and GOG Galaxy, all pronunciation stuff aside, that's a decent competition to Steam, but we really haven't seen like that big of competition to Steam, and I think this is the biggest opportunity to do it. And normally I do kind of not necessarily look down, but I'm not very optimistic with other game, platforms. Like, I've used GOG before, and it's okay. I personally am going to stick with Steam, obviously, just because I'm also invested into Steam, and that might stay true with the Epic Game Store depending on what it's like, but it definitely, not only the 88%, money wise, I mean, that's amazing, but the fact that they also have Fortnite, so most people are already going to have the Epic Games Store on their computer because of Fortnite on the PC, how big that is. So people are going to realize, oh wait, I can buy games on the thing I use Fortnite for as well. Well, I'll be damned. And then on top of that, Epic Games has a buttload of money to put into this client. They're not a small little company trying to do this grassroots platform movement. They're a big company with a lot of money because of Fortnite, and like they said, they're using that money that they're making from Fortnite to kind of cut the cost of, the money they could be making like Steam does. So Steam makes a ton of money with the 30%, and Epic Games could be making a ton of money, but they're like, no, we're making enough money on Fortnite, we're gonna only give you guys 88%, we'll give you 88% of it. And obviously there's a bunch of business decisions in it, because they're in the news, they have people talking about the Epic Games Store before it's even announced, there's a lot of hype for it before it's even out, and it's because of that revenue split, and that's great. And I personally am really optimistic. I think a lot of companies are going to want their games on the Epic Games Store as well, just because there's a lot lower of a risk. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, we can put it on this thing. I mean, we make 88% of it versus, okay, well, do we want to put it on, say, GOG? They might have their own things, but you don't get to keep 88% of the money you make on GOG, but now Epic Games Store you do. So, I mean, there's a lot more of an incentive for these bigger developers as well to put their games on the Epic Games Store, and that's pretty big. Having other big companies put your stuff on your platform is always important. And so I'm excited to see what comes from this. I'd like to see some more of what actually is like it. I think there's a lot of things that go into having a good game platform. You need to have a good friend system. You need to have a good profile system. Achievements. How are they going to handle all this stuff? I'd love to see it, but I'm actually pretty optimistic, and I can't wait to see what it turns out to be. But if you guys have any opinions on this, let me know in the comments down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, then consider leaving a like down below and subscribing to see more content. New videos come out every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And like always, guys, I hope you guys have a great rest of the day.